I just finished up watching Wodapalooza, and my reaction, really exciting, filled with drama, but a tiny bit disappointing.
Not get the lift from the previous thing.
And Noah Olsen's gonna miss again.
We're gonna start with the team competition because I think that's what's going to be on everyone's mind because that just ended. And the team competition, I think, was in some ways one of the best we have seen. The field was just so strong on both the men's and the women's side, and it was exciting until the very end. Going into the last event, which was a double scored event with a weird and different scoring system, we didn't know who was gonna win it. And I think that's the best way a competition can go. You can't make a competition go that way. We've seen at the games where people like Tia and Matt and Mayhem are just so far ahead that no one can catch them. But this competition, we were lucky enough to have it where both the men and the women, if things broke the right way, could have ended up totally changing based on that last event, men and women teams. And we did see some shaking up on the podium after that last event, but it did end with the people who were in first for the men and the women teams, both ending up in first after those two events as well. There has been some different reactions to the scoring system Wodapalooza chose to use. It was a little bit different than what we've seen in other competitions. I'll put it up on the screen here.
Oh, here we go. He got, wow, this can't be right.
Wow.
That can't be
that's
right.
Insane. So if you get fourth place in two events and somebody like Good Dudes gets first place in those two events, then like Good Dudes can jump all the way to third.
But there was a little bit of a different system when it came to how many points separated each position. So it really favored doing very well and really hurt you even if you finished as good as third or fourth. You were still punished severely because the points just went down by so much. But I think part of that is because they cut it to 10 teams. And with cutting it to 10 teams, it had to impact the scoring, and this is the way they chose to do it. And in the end, it did make it even more exciting. And I think in all sports, it's not just CrossFit. In every sport that we watch on TV, the organizers want to make it as exciting as possible, and this brought exciting finishes. So like I said, that team of PB&J, those are the initials of the athletes. That was Pat Vellner, Brent Fikowski, and Jeff Adler. They ended up in first. They were in first. It wasn't as in question as the women's. So we go over to the women's side. This right here is the end of the last event that put a lot of things into chaos.
Brooke Wells crosses the finish line. She's athlete 1. Laura Horvath is next. She crosses. Amanda Barnhart's athlete 2. Jamie Simmons right there is athlete 3. And O'Connell is athlete 3. Now, even if O'Connell is last, Gabby Magawa is also crossing. Slow, slow, slow. Magawa's foot is ahead of O'Connell's foot. So BPN had all 3 athletes ahead of the entire team of All-American girls. The question is, what's the rule?
So if BPN finished one position farther down, they actually ended up finishing, then they would have been knocked from first to second, and the daughters and Mal O'Brien would have taken over that first place position. Because of that last sequence you saw, they ended up still in first. Initially, based on the scoring that we saw on the top of the screen, it appeared that they were going to lose the first place position. But when they reviewed it back, which took some time, they determined that because all of BPN's athletes crossed the finish line before all of the All-American girls crossed the finish line, that meant that BPN won. So it looked like the scoring on the top of the screen indicated who crossed the line first, who was the first athlete out of the 6 athletes to cross, but it really was who was the last athlete on each team, and Christy Ermo crossed the line after Gabby Magawa.
The scores were tied for first place, but your 2023 Tier Wodapalooza Elite Female Division Champion teams, Team BPN.
So that seconds, that step made a huge difference, and that's what kept BPN on the top. I think they were dominant all weekend, and they were the best looking team all weekend. They beat the daughters and Mal O'Brien in, I believe, 5 of the events, almost all of the events, and I do think that it makes sense they end up on the top, but I do think the scoring system did make it more exciting, and in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, when you sign up for a competition, you're accepting whatever weird scoring they're gonna choose to use, and this was it. I think maybe it's better for the sport overall if there is more of a consistent scoring, just so everybody knows going in what it's going to be. But for excitement, this couldn't have played out any better. And the tiebreaker on that last event is one we've actually seen a whole lot. It was just who had the most first place finishes or just the most best finishes. Like if neither team had firsts, who had the most seconds would be what they go to, but both teams had firsts. That's what we've seen in a lot of competitions. Totally makes sense. That team BPN, I thought they would end up on the podium, but not necessarily first. I was very impressed by just how good they looked. Laura Horvath is someone to watch out for with Tia out of the running this year to win the CrossFit Games, and she showed that this weekend. That team also looked fun. You saw Jamie Simmons just having a good time out there. And Jamie also brought something important to this team. She has team experience. She's competed on a team at the CrossFit Games. That's also something that Pat brought to his team as well. He competed on a team at the CrossFit Games, his first appearance, and I feel like a lot of people forget about that. I was also really impressed by that Canadian PB&J team because 2 out of the 3 athletes competed in the individual competition, and then they went and smashed the team competition, and nothing's more impressive than that. I mean, most of the athletes who did well, when we look at the women's side, were fresh. And these 2 guys competed and beat their bodies up over 2 previous days and came back and did awesome here. That would be Pat Vellner and Brent Fikowski. But those athletes are just so talented, and I think that's what made the difference here. But who I initially thought was going to win was the boys, and they likely would have if it wasn't for Noah Olson not getting an overhead squat in the weightlifting workout. And that was crazy to see because I think it would have made most sense for him just to drop the weight. Even if he got a much lesser lift, they wouldn't have came in last. I mean, they were the only team, I believe, that had one athlete not record a weight, and that put them in dead last in that event. Luckily, they didn't need any more points to make it to the top 10. They were still like securely in there, but that likely cost them the weekend.
Even better to drop weight than it is to not get the lift from the previous thing.
And Noah Olson's gonna miss again.
Just another tidbit I wanted to throw in here. They had Mat Fraser on the broadcast for a little bit, and they asked him about finding out about Tia's pregnancy and talking to Mal about it.
You know, it's no secret that with Tia not competing, everyone now turns their attention to Mal O'Brien. I'm sure she's aware of that pressure or aware of those expectations, how she's handling that.
It changes nothing for her.
And he wanted to get Mal's head right before hearing the news.
I had a chat with her, and you know, I found out the news, you know, a couple months prior, and you know, so you know, I had a talk with Mal. I didn't share that secret. That wasn't my place to do that. But you know, just letting her know, like, hey, we're doing what we're doing, regardless of who you're competing against. This is what you need to do because these are your weaknesses, these are your strengths. So we're just getting better as best as you can be, regardless of who you're going against. So when the news came out, it was kind of like a 2-minute conversation, but that was about it.
Now going back to the individual competition that ended on Friday, on the men's side of the field, it ended up with the people on the podium that I thought would be on the podium, just in a little bit different of an order. Ricky Garrard came out looking fantastic, and he held it all weekend. Roman Krennikov battled him back and forth, never really getting first overall, but beating him in some of the workouts. And I think that's a battle that we're gonna see for years to come, and I'm super excited about it. Pat Vellner kind of didn't look as good as those two guys, but managed to keep himself in the conversation and get that third place finish. But I am really excited to see both Roman and Ricky in Madison this summer. And I really think Justin has to be looking over his shoulder because these two guys are coming for him. And I think one of them might be able to do it. We'll have to see come August. And on the women's side, things took a little bit of a turn. So Emily Rolfe was in the top 3 for most of the event until she injured herself, and that really changed everything. I think that she would have won. She was in first going into the second day, and she was in first after the lifting event, which would have been her worst event. And then she injured herself during the swim event, it appeared, and that kind of changed a lot of it. Although Paige Powers was doing great, I think it might have been a little bit more of a battle between the two of them, but that injury really took Emily Rolfe out of the picture. Emma Carey looked great after the first 2 events, and I'm not sure if it was just those 2 events favored her and the other events were never going to be her events, or if it was nerves or anything like that. But she did end up getting that third place position on the podium. And with this being her first competition back after injury, I think that's still really good. And I think she's going to make it to Madison. I don't have any doubts about that. Danny Spiegel ended up on the podium as well in second, and she's one of the most experienced athletes in the field, so it was good to see that pay off, and I think she's a crowd favorite. It was good to see her perform in a way that I think a lot of people want to see her perform. But overall, Paige Powers was very consistent. She only had 1 finish outside of the top 10 and 2 first place finishes. So I think that she really proved that she deserves to be a games athlete, which I think was something that may have been questioned a little bit because she was in that weakest semifinal. I think based on the semifinals, if you looked at all of them, the Atlas Games just didn't have the level of athletes that all the other semifinals had. So I think some people were wondering if the athletes that made it out of that field were really good enough to be there. And I think Paige did show that at least she is good enough to compete with the girls at the games, and she hopes to be back there next year. And I think she's someone we should keep our eye on at the games next year and really for years to come because she is still a very young athlete. I believe she is still 19. She may be 20 now, but that's just very, very young and has years of competing left for her. The only thing I was disappointed with at Wodapalooza was some of the broadcast issues. And I really don't think it is Wodapalooza's fault. I think it's more of a server issue and something that's they really couldn't have much control over. But we did lose some of the heats during the stream. The stream went down. The stream was jumping around. If you look at the screen now, I'll put up a clip where things were just all over the place and skipping between different times.
She is in at 19:20.39 seconds to take the final touch for Powers.
They did re-upload some of them, but it was just after the day was over and after we had already known the results of the next event, and it just didn't matter as much. I don't know what they could have done to make that better, but I do feel that I was a little bit disappointed as someone watching at home, not being able to see the competition, because I think even more people watch at home than are watching there. And I did like the new system of having the teams and the individuals for the elites go at different times, because I felt like I got to watch all of it and enjoy all of it. And when you have both going on at the same time, it's just hard to keep track of all of it and really enjoy all of it. When they're both going on, I feel like you might be skipping around a little bit, not watching as many of the heats because there's just so much to consume. But this made it a little bit more palatable and easy to enjoy. But I don't know how many athletes, if they do this again next year, will choose to do both, because I heard in some of the broadcasts and some of the stuff I saw from Brian Friend when he was on Savan's show that some of the athletes weren't super psyched they had signed up for both after doing the first competition. So I don't know if we're gonna see this overlap in the individual and team elite athletes like we did this year again, but I imagine we'll see some people overlapping, and they'll still get big names. So I do, in my opinion, hope that they keep this 2-day format where we get to see both and spotlight both, as opposed to having the teams become sort of a back burner to the individuals. Let me know what you think in the comments. I really appreciate you all for watching. Make sure you like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Lots more stuff to come, including the Open, which is right around the corner. I'll be documenting my experience and, talking about it. See you in the next one.